What's up, everybody? So Dana White and the UFC just dropped some major news last night that the UFC is heading to Saudi Arabia June 22nd, live on ABC. The headliner of the fight night will be Robert Whittaker versus Khamzat Chimaev. Guys, this is a huge announcement. I'm going to break down all these matchups. I'm going to show you the other fights that were announced. We're going to talk about them as we go. This is a huge fight night, guys. And this is very clear that, the PFL went and did the PFL versus Bellator champ card back in February. There was some discussion about Saudi being a little unhappy with the UFC. Boy, did they deliver with this one, because this is one of the better fight night cards we've seen in quite some time. And this is a banger matchup at middleweight here. But let me show you some of the other matchups. So this is the headliner. Then we have Johnny Walker versus Volkan Oezdemir. Then we have Shara Bullet versus Ihor Potieria, which is a great matchup. And I thought that we were maybe going to see Shara Bullet take on a ranked opponent, but we don't get that yet. So kind of interested to see how this kind of plays out. Then we have Kelvin Gastelum versus D-Rod, which, I think it's a good fight, right? I know it's going to take some heat considering what we saw from Kelvin Gastelum his last time out. D-Rod hasn't looked his best as of lately. Granted, he went in there against a highly touted prospect in Ian Gary, so curious to see how both of these guys bounce back. Then we have Sergei Pavlovich versus Alexander Volkov. Now, it's kind of interesting that this fight was announced because there was some discussion about Jailton Almeida taking on Alexander Volkov and then seeing that fight kind of fall apart. And now Sergei Pavlovich versus Alexander Volkov. This is a great matchup, guys. And shout out to Big Marcel here, man, putting out the announcements for us on social media. And guys, when we talk about these fights, right, the UFC going to Saudi Arabia, it being a fight night, being what it is, this is a huge matchup. And Robert Whittaker versus Khamzat Chimaev, the reason I thought the UFC was going to look this route, right? If Khamzat gets a win over Robert Whittaker, you can't deny the fact that he's going to fight for the belt next. It gives him a huge win inside the top five, but not just a top five win. A guy in Robert Whittaker who's coming off a win over Paulo Costa, and a guy that has basically been the Max Holloway at 185. He held the belt. He's been one of the best guys the division has ever had. So if Khamzat's able to go in there, get through Robert Whittaker, very clear that he deserves to fight for the belt. Now, Dana even said in the announcement, the winner of this is the #1 contender for the strap. So whoever wins this, man, fighting for the belt. And, as much as the UFC, this being in Saudi, this is going to be kind of built around Khamzat. This is all about trying to get Khamzat to a title shot. It's a smart play by the UFC. Why? Because if Robert Whittaker wins, no harm, no foul. Like, obviously, they'll be disappointed that Khamzat is the guy not getting the shot. But Robert Whittaker is a fan favorite. I feel like nobody dislikes Bobby Knuckles. And him with a potential rematch with Dricus du Plessis is a big fight. Now, I will say, him versus Adesanya for the trilogy, I know that they were really close in their second, in the second meeting there. I kind of thought I could have seen how Robert Whittaker could have won that fight. But at the end of the day, it's 2-0 Izzy. And when we see these trilogies where it's kind of 2-0, towards one side, it's not exactly the most exciting when we see kind of a rematch. But nonetheless, this is a huge fight because Khamzat Chimaev, we haven't seen fight a top contender at middleweight, right? We saw him go up there against Gerald Meerschaert. We saw him starch Meerschaert with a right hand. That was incredibly impressive. His most recent outing was against Kamaru Usman, who, granted, that was Usman's first fight at 185. It was on 9-day notice, all those different things. But nonetheless, Khamzat was pretty impressive in that matchup. I know he, damaged his hand. I'll let you know that he said he broke his hand, I think, in that matchup. So to see Khamzat compromised and do what he did in that matchup against a highly touted guy in Kamaru Usman, right? One of the best guys to ever fight at 170 pounds, a former champion, all those things. That was impressive by Khamzat. Now, this fight with Whittaker, it's very interesting because we know what Khamzat's game plan is going to be. Race across the cage, get a hold of Robert Whittaker and try and ragdoll him and put him out of there early and try to take his back, submit him, whatever it is. And Robert Whittaker's going to know that coming into this matchup. Now, the question is, what happens if Khamzat's able to get a hold of Robert Whittaker? Is Whittaker able to get away? Is he able to fend off Khamzat and ultimately survive that first round? Because with this being a fight night headliner, this is a 5-round fight, ladies and gentlemen. We have not seen Khamzat Chimaev in a 5-round fight yet. And from what we've seen from Chimaev, we've seen a guy that's a wrecking ball. We've seen how dangerous Chimaev can be. We've seen how aggressive and how fast of a starter he is. But we've seen him get really tired after that first round. And I would like to believe if Robert Whittaker is able to fight off the onslaught of Khamzat Chimaev early, that he's able to get through that first round, and then he's just able to light Chimaev up on the feet. Because make no mistake about it, as good as Khamzat Chimaev has been, Robert Whittaker is the clear-cut guy, in my opinion, who has paid his dues and shown time in and time out that he is one of the best at 185 pounds of all time. And he's still got it, man. Like, he was in there against one of the best versions of Paulo Costa we've seen. He ate a crazy wheel kick. I don't know how he didn't, that didn't knock him out. But nonetheless, Whittaker was able to weather the storm, and he was able to do what Whittaker does. Float around on the outside, sting Paulo Costa at range, dart in and out, and do his thing. He has a significant striking advantage over Khamzat Chimaev, in my opinion. I think Robert Whittaker is clearly the better striker in this matchup. He has the speed advantage. He has more variety in terms of the striking. But with Khamzat, it's the question of he does throw a really good jab. Khamzat does have good power in his hands. And we saw Dricus du Plessis. He was able to drop Robert Whittaker with a stiff jab when he switched to southpaw. I'm going to look for Khamzat to try to implement maybe a similar game plan, because this is the telltale sign, man, for Khamzat Chimaev. All roads lead to this matchup. Are you who you say you are, Khamzat? Because if you get through Robert Whittaker, you're absolutely fighting for the belt next. And if you can't get through Robert Whittaker, it's going to be absolutely crushing to the Khamzat, to the Khamzat fan base and the Khamzat, because all roads lead to this matchup, guys. This is the biggest opportunity of Khamzat's career. It's in Saudi Arabia. The fan base is going to be on his side. This is all built around getting Khamzat a title shot. Now, I would like to think, guys, if this fight stays on the feet, Khamzat's going to be in a lot of trouble. And I got to be honest with you, I'm leaning towards Robert Whittaker in this matchup. I really am, because we know about Robert Whittaker's grappling. Now, what does concern me is what we saw Dricus du Plessis do to him in terms of the grappling. Because if that's Khamzat, I can see Khamzat getting a finish. But I just have seen where Khamzat gets tired and all these different things. It's just very concerning to me heading into a matchup with a true veteran in Robert Whittaker, who has just been sensational for so long. This is a great matchup, guys. No doubt about it. But okay, moving on to Johnny Walker, Volkan Oezdemir. I think it's a great fight, right? I know Volkan Oezdemir, he's a guy like, a few years back, he takes on Daniel Cormier for the light heavyweight title. We were talking about Volkan Oezdemir as like a contender back then, and now he's just kind of been a guy floating around at 205 for an extended period of time. And he goes in there against a guy in Johnny Walker who's coming off a loss to Magomedov, and Johnny Walker, he's very explosive. He's athletic. He's one of the more athletic guys in the weight class. But Johnny Walker just can't seem to find a way to put it all together, right? He's had some impressive performances. Yes, he's unpredictable. Yes, he does have good power. And he's very unorthodox in there. But we just haven't seen him utilize his range the way maybe we would like to see, because he's definitely one of the bigger guys in the weight class. He's tall. The guy's a specimen in the weight class. Like, he's absolutely fast. He's got great power, but we have not seen him be able to put it all together and string things together. But I do think he's able to go in there and get the job done against Volkan Oezdemir. I think that this is great matchmaking by the UFC to try to get Johnny Walker back on track and try to aid Johnny Walker, because despite what people want to say about Johnny, he's still exciting. He has an entertaining fighting style for the most part, but this is a big opportunity for him because he's kind of had some things slip through the cracks here. The Anthony Smith performance wasn't very impressive. Then he goes out there against Magomedov. There was the whole thing that happened, the first time out, so they had to rebook it. And then he comes out there, Johnny Walker, man, big opportunity for you, but I do think that he's going to get it done. Okay, moving on. Shara Bullet and Ihor Potieria. I think this is one of those things where I do think that this is a good fight. I think that this is a good fight. Two up-and-comers, guys, that a lot of people have their eyes on. I still think Shara Bullet is going to win this fight. I think that he's a guy the UFC really has their sights set on to be a draw, potentially, when they go to Saudi Arabia, when they book these types of cards. Because Shara Bullet, man, he's got the look to him. He's got the fighting style. He's exciting. But we've seen with the grappling, there's a little bit of holes in the game, right? We saw what Bruno Silva was able to do to him, which does raise a little bit of that kind of, puts my antennas up because I'm a little concerned, off of what we saw in that matchup. But overall, I think this is a great stylistic fight for Shara Bullet. I do think that he gets this thing done. I thought maybe we were going to see him against a ranked opponent. However, that doesn't happen. I know that there were some talks of him and maybe Marvin Vettori or something like that. That didn't come to fruition. So overall, pretty exciting matchup. I still think Shara Bullet is going to get this thing done. Okay. D-Rod, Kelvin Gastelum, right? I briefly touched on this at the beginning of the video. I just don't know what we're going to see in this matchup, right? We saw Kelvin Gastelum for an extended period of time at 185. He drops back down to 170 and just looked really labored in a fight against Sean Brady. Now, I know Sean Brady, he's one of the better grapplers at 170. He is a top contender at this point at 170, but that just was a little bit of a disappointing performance if you're on the side of Kelvin Gastelum coming into this matchup. We're just kind of wondering, where's Kelvin Gastelum at? Because he got very fatigued. He didn't have the same pop and the same movement that we're kind of used to with Kelvin Gastelum. So coming into a fight with a guy like D-Rod, D-Rod's had a little bit of ups and downs recently himself as well. So D-Rod's, he's hungry for a win, man. D-Rod's, he's not a world beater, but he is an exciting fighter. He's got good striking. He brings it every time. We saw him against Ian Gary. Ian Gary just set him up beautifully. We've seen how good Ian Gary has been. So really no harm, no foul coming off the last, fights for both of these guys. This is a big opportunity for both of them at 170 because whoever wins this is right on the brink of, being back in the rankings and having that one last shot to maybe try to climb towards, towards the top of the division, because we've seen Kelvin Gastelum kind of do it all at this point, but the question is, how much do these guys still want it at this point? Is this kind of for a paycheck, or where are they kind of at in their careers? So that's going to be, something to keep your eye on heading into this fight. But I think this is a fun matchup considering where both guys are at in their career and kind of the trajectory that they've both been on. Okay, the final matchup. Sergei Pavlovich, Alexander Volkov. Guys, this is an incredible fight. This is a great fight because what we've seen from Sergei Pavlovich, he's predominantly a guy that gets it done with his hands, right? He's got ridiculous power. We saw him, his last time out against Tom Aspinall. It didn't go his way. He still hurt Tom Aspinall, man. And Sergei Pavlovich has, I would still say, he might still have the most, now that Francis Ngannou is not in the UFC, this might be the hardest hitter in the weight class. I know Tom Aspinall has really good power in his hands, but Sergei Pavlovich, man, he's got some serious one-shot KO power, as well as Derek Lewis, we know. But, Alexander Volkov, he's one of the more technical heavyweights out there, right? I know that he's not necessarily known as a one-shot knockout guy, which is, kind of weird when we're looking at heavyweights, but he's kind of like the Cyril Gane, right? He's kind of similar in that aspect where he does have good power because he's a heavyweight, but he's a lot more technical than these other guys that just kind of rely on their hands, like a Tuivasa, like a Sergei Pavlovich, where those front kicks that Volkov likes to throw, they're nasty. And if he could get that going early on and kind of sit on the outside and stay relatively safe and utilize his range and distance, I think Volkov can actually pull off an upset in this matchup. Now, I do think if Sergei Pavlovich is going to get this done, I think it's going to have to be in the first round because we've seen Pavlovich slow down kind of as the fight progresses. He does not defend leg kicks very well. So I think that Volkov's going to look to beat up that lead leg of Pavlovich. We saw Aspinall do that, try to kind of take away some of that movement, make Pavlovich a little bit slower in his pursuit, trying to close you down. But overall, this is a great fight. This is a fun stylistic fight because this is one of those matchups where you get a guy like Pavlovich who hits incredibly hard, has really good hands, but he's coming into a matchup where he's going up against a guy who's a little bit unorthodox for the weight class, being so tall, being very good, keeping you at range with front kicks and being a little bit more technical for a heavyweight. I think it's a great matchup. But overall, guys, this is an incredible card. The UFC absolutely has delivered here, coming back coming to Saudi Arabia, bringing a huge fight night. And this matchup between Whittaker and Khamzat Chimaev, this is crazy because if Khamzat Chimaev gets through Robert Whittaker, he's absolutely fighting for the belt next. And then if Whittaker pulls off the upset, well, he's fighting for the belt as well. And then I just kind of feel bad, man, because Sean Strickland, it kind of shows what the UFC is looking to do in the middleweight division. Sean Strickland fought to a really close decision, which I actually thought he won the fight against Duplessis. He's not going to probably get his rematch. It looks like the winner of Whittaker and Chimaev is going to be getting that opportunity. I don't know, but I want to hear what you all think down in the comments. Like this video, subscribe to the channel if you have not already. I appreciate you all. See you next time.